There's no way I'm misremembering. Good morning again, everyone. I am still Mickey Mullen. I haven't changed my name since the last time I spoke. And we are going to begin by me introducing Melissa Blasek, who is a wife, mother, music teacher, New Hampshire native, and liberty lover. She used to live a quiet life, but the pandemic changed everything. She is now the executive director of Rebuild NH, formerly Reopen NH, an organization dedicated to restoring the rule of law and fighting authoritarianism and government overreach associated with COVID-19 pandemic. She is a state representative from Merrimack, working to achieve these goals from the inside. Please welcome Melissa Blasek.
Yeah, I'm shorter. Okay, here we go. Oh my God, this feels very like I need to stand on a thing. All right. Well, yes, I am Melissa Blasek, and I'm a state representative, and I am the executive director of Rebuild New Hampshire, which was originally formed as Reopen New Hampshire. New Hampshire is arguably the freest state and the freest country on earth. And that means that we are the final battleground in the war for human freedom. Yet over the last 2 years, almost the entire Western world has been subjected to lockdowns, restrictions, and mandates. Our societies were segregated between essential versus non-essential, and then masked versus unmasked, and now vaccinated versus unvaccinated. We were ruled over with dictates perpetrated by unelected bureaucrats and politicians with excessive and unchecked state of emergency authority. Our constitutional form of government and the rule of law was suspended, and government-designed propaganda flowed excessively through a complicit media. Any dissent against the prevailing narrative was systematically suppressed with censorship and labels of dangerous misinformation. With a known partnership between social media giants and the federal government, the thought police suddenly became real. The world started to become a libertarian nightmare on March 11th, 2020. That was the day that COVID-19 was officially declared a pandemic. And it happened in the same way that tyrants always seize power in the modern world, with promises that it was for people's health and safety. I don't need to remind this particular audience that no government has ever revoked freedom for altruistic purposes. To be clear, complete and utter destruction of freedom does not occur overnight. The tanks don't come rolling down the streets overnight. Every last freedom is not stripped at once. Auschwitz did not fall from the sky. There are many stepping stones along the path to completely eliminating human freedom so that atrocities can occur. As a society, we went very far down that path. Each statement of division was another step. Each suppression of truth was another leap, and each mandate was another jump. I believe that we have turned the corner, and we are on the off-ramp back to some amount of sanity. Did this right turn back to liberty occur because politicians handed us back our freedoms for being obedient subjects? No, it occurred because people fought back. It occurred because people had had enough. Politicians make politically expedient decisions. So if the people demand something eventually, politicians must acquiesce. And this is the secret to activism. Work to be the loudest voice in front of the politicians. In New Hampshire, we pulled ourselves back from the brink sooner than in other places. And today I'm going to discuss my organization, Rebuild New Hampshire's role in this effort. Personally, I was anti-lockdown from day one. I was baffled that anyone could believe that a 2-week lockdown of what I now refer to as the laptop class would do anything to eliminate a highly contagious respiratory virus. But I briefly, bought into the narrative that we needed to prepare the hospitals. Certainly in a pandemic, expanding hospital capacity and ensuring they had the proper supplies seemed logical. Although, ironically, we now have less of a hospital capacity than we did at the beginning of the pandemic because, it turns out some people don't like to be bullied and coerced into experimental medications. But I quickly worried within days of the lockdown order that people were replacing temporarily slowing the spread with disease eradication in their minds. If disease eradication was the goal, the lockdown would never end. It kept me up at night. It made me sick. I could only think of how this would destroy the working class and destabilize the planet and ultimately lead to war, which I guess, by the way, I'm right? But what was more shocking to me was that a lockdown was even possible in this country. I thought we had a constitution. Like, how does the government have the ability to quarantine healthy people and shut down businesses? I was very naive, but I felt a profound sense of sadness and loss when I realized how fragile liberty was. After a press conference with DHHS Commissioner Laurie Shibinette revealed that the hospitals would not become overwhelmed with the current disease progression, Andrew Manous, J.R. Hull, and Carolyn McKinney formed Reopen New Hampshire, and on April 18th, 2020, Reopen New Hampshire had their first protest in front of the State House in Concord, and despite the cold rain, it drew about 500 people. The second protest on May 2nd drew about 1,000 people. By May, although restrictions had started to ease because, frankly, even the average New Hampshire person has slightly less tolerance for oppression, it became obvious that this was a long-haul fight. It also became obvious that fighting the governor directly was kind of like running into a brick wall because Governor Sununu really bought into the prevailing lockdown narrative. So Reopen New Hampshire switched much of our focus from the governor to the legislature. New Hampshire's legislature is unique. The legislature is supposed to be the most powerful branch of government in the state. And with such a large legislature, especially relative to the population, legislators are very accessible to the people. You spit in the state and you hit a legislature, especially at Liberty Forum. There's like 10 in this room. We also realized that the only way to end the restrictions was to end the state of emergency, which had handed the governor unlimited power to impose any mandates he wanted. And it was possible for the legislature to end the state of emergency through concurrent resolution. We endorsed and helped promote candidates, and ultimately 76 endorsed legislators won in November, myself included, and the Republicans regained the majorities in both the House and the Senate. Like any good activist organization should, Rebuild New Hampshire has focused a lot of our time on list building. The protest in early 2020, paired with several petition campaigns, built our army. And in January 2021, when the new legislative session began, our new activists went to work making phone calls and emailing and attending hearings. The House Freedom Caucus was revived, and our 74 endorsed representatives formed its basis. And its main purpose that year was to end the state of emergency and reform the state of emergency laws. The governor was not happy about our attempts to reform his state of emergency authority. So the changes were put into the budget trailer bill. And since our governor does not have the ability to line item veto any bill, this put a lot of pressure on the governor. He ended the restrictions in April 2021, thinking this would pacify us, but he remained resolute in his assumption that we needed a state of emergency to continue to receive federal grants. This is actually the part of the story I'm particularly proud of because I had spent the previous winter reading all of the laws surrounding this. And I wrote an op-ed spelling out why it was absolutely not true that we would lose federal funding by restoring our constitutional form of government. I know it's not pathetic to say, but there we go. The money thing was really something. By early June, it became very evident that I had been correct, and along with some substantial changes to the state of emergency laws, the governor ended the COVID-19 state of emergency. Of course, these days, relief doesn't last long because tyrants don't sleep. When the Delta wave came through in the summer, the federal government amped up the propaganda against the unvaccinated, and a new wave of mandates flooded in, this time from the federal government. I also became acutely aware that we had been missing a vital piece of the COVID puzzle in our fight, and this is the fight against the destruction of individualized medicine. We had already experienced the demonization of hydroxychloroquine through falsified studies and outright smear campaigns. But it was the FDA's disturbing, demeaning, and dangerous Twitter post calling ivermectin a horse dewormer at the height of the ivermectin prescriptions during the summer Delta wave, and the subsequent systematic threats to doctors who dared to treat COVID-19 that showed me the real medical tyranny around us. Healthcare has long been corrupted by government, but it was Obamacare that really put the nail in the coffin of independent medicine, making our society truly ripe for medical tyranny. Adding in the financial incentives and massive COVID spending bills to only treat using certain patented drugs, and we were in the perfect storm of death and destruction. The COVID-19 response was years' worth of big government regulation and collusion issues converging. We have long known that government steals our money to enslave us by attaching strings for when they distribute it back to us. And the perfect example of this is the CMS vaccine mandate that was upheld because of the money. Vaccine liability is another example. The 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act removed vaccine manufacturer liability for all vaccines on the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, childhood schedule, while the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, that's the PrEP Act, removed liability for any product with emergency use authorization. As we speak, there is no COVID-19 vaccine that is available in this country that is FDA approved. Therefore, all COVID-19 vaccines are liability-free. Yet this vaccine is being mandated by public and private actors alike, and society is becoming segregated based off of someone's willingness to take a liability-free experimental product. This is not capitalism. This is cronyism. When the COVID-19 vaccine is added to the ACIP childhood schedule, once it is FDA approved in that age group, the manufacturer immunity will exist forever. Furthermore, while it is illegal for a pharmaceutical company to advertise an emergency use authorized product because the safety thresholds for emergency use authorization are lower than for FDA approval, the government has taken your tax dollars and launched a multi-billion-dollar vaccine advertising campaign. Additionally, a host of privacy infringements that erupted largely after 9/11 have come back to haunt us and have only grown. I potentially see the biggest issue facing us long-term being the data collection and invasion of privacy. This is the birth of the biomedical surveillance state. Suddenly, we have apps on our phones that prove what medical procedures we've had and government databases of religious exemptions, and I'm not sure where that ends. Will our bank accounts be frozen for dissent against the government? When the government can track you so easily and can control your actions through restricting your access to your own wealth, there is no freedom left. That is absolutely when we become slaves. Rebuild New Hampshire's focus in 2022 is to finish the state of emergency reforms from last year and tackle the medical freedom issue. This year, the legislature has dozens of rebuild-supported bills before them. A pair of bills to take on COVID treatment issues currently has bipartisan support in the House. One would prohibit a doctor or a pharmacist from having their license revoked due to off-label prescriptions. The other would make ivermectin available without a prescription via a standing order. I'm very proud that we have started the conversation here in New Hampshire about the threats to individualized medicine. And in that vein, the legislature is also attempting to legalize more forms of direct payment model medical facilities where doctors can practice medicine without government strings. In addition, there are bills to prohibit public school mask mandates and to limit town authority so that local tyranny isn't allowed to run amok. And of course, there are dozens of bills to take on the vaccine mandate issue from all angles. There are bills aimed at making us into a sanctuary state in regard to federal vaccine mandates and data collection, bills to prevent government-encouraged vaccine discrimination, bills to prohibit mandates at all different levels, and bills to create liability for mandates. The real question now is what will pass. The reality is the House has a very tight majority. Attendance on any given day will determine the outcome of a particular bill. But of course, activism works. Politicians are motivated by elections first and foremost, and they all have an election coming up. It is your work that helps get bills across the finish line. What does the future hold? Well, none of us are entirely sure. The global elites definitely are not done with us yet, and that's become glaringly obvious in the recent weeks in Canada. We lost a tremendous amount of ground in the fight for liberty over the last 2 years. But here in New Hampshire, we lost less ground, and we fought back more. But we cannot grow complacent. The biggest challenge in the legislature right now is the tight majority in the House, so please consider running for office. We need reinforcements. Please stay engaged in the process. If you get on Rebuild New Hampshire's email list, right up there, a little red bar there, we do some of the heavy lifting for you by keeping you up to date on particular bills, but we need you as the activist to write the emails and make the calls and attend hearings. I know it's tiring constantly fighting against authoritarianism, but like I said before, New Hampshire is the last battleground in the war for human freedom. After all, freedom is not free. I want to end my speech with a message of hope. We have a unique opportunity to attain more liberty than we started with. Most of us were unaware of a lot of the mechanisms that had been built for years that were put into motion during the COVID pandemic to oppress us. We know now, and we can fight to destroy these mechanisms. We do have public opinion on our side now, and the Democrats are in retreat. But now is not the time to allow the enemy to retreat. This is where Republicans fail. They are more than willing to just sweep the entire last 2 years under the rug and pretend like it never happened. But we can't let them do that. We need safeguards and protections from the destruction that occurred to our rights. If we don't do this, we are admitting that our rights were simply privileges contingent on blind obedience to authority. There must be a reckoning and improvements must be made. I'm going to end with a quote from Dr. Pierre Corey, who some of you might know is the founder of the Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance. Live free or die has never meant more to me than it does now. We must live free or we will die. So I'd like to take questions, and we could talk about whatever you'd like. We can talk about COVID. Dr. Martin Koldorf is actually in the audience, I see. And so if you have any, we could maybe put him on the spot if you have any COVID questions. And we could talk about activism, Rebuild's work, legislation. Anyone have any? Please.
So come on up, give your name, concise question, and I'm going to step away.
Hi, thanks. My name is Rich. I've been talking to lots of fellow activists that there's sort of different thoughts on what to do about fighting mandates, fighting orders. There's like this whole property rights versus human rights versus medical freedom versus public health, and like where. And I haven't looked at all the bills, so there's all these different philosophies of what's the best approach to take, and it seems like there's some I won't say infighting, but
there is.
Okay.
Yes.
So like where do you see and I read there's also the practicality of just going through a legislative process, which by definition is imperfect. So where do you think is the most likely avenue where it's actually going to get a success that doesn't try to cut the baby in half thing? So where do you think, practically speaking, you'd be or even what you'd be happy with as a first step,
sure,
on getting us, protecting us for the next time this happens or the next variant comes by or something?
Yeah. This, dealing with, liberty people is kind of like herding cats, and lots of different opinions on this. I'll give you my opinion first. Life, liberty, and property. Life comes first. Property comes last. In the hierarchy of rights, your right to your own life and your own body comes first. There are very few basic functions of government, and one of which is that you can't. The government is there to make sure that people can't infringe upon another person. Well, being coerced into any medication is an infringement upon another person. And we have all sorts of things that the government says. I mean, assault is illegal. That's infringement on another person. Rape is illegal. Even coerced rape is illegal because that's an infringement upon another person. And we have laws against those things regardless of who the actor is, regardless of whether it's the government or a private business or an individual. And so I believe that mandated vaccines should be illegal. However, yes, there are the libertarians who prioritize property rights over life rights. So it's been a challenge. We literally put in, oh God, Leah, how many bills were there on vaccines? Like 40, 30, I don't know, something like that. Because we all met and we decided we'd throw it all out there and see what sticks. And so that's sort of where we are with that right now. I believe that likely the winner will be a vaccine exemption bill. But it only applies to business. It applies to the government, right? The government can't make you get a vaccine. We all agree on that, right? But as far as businesses, it says that any business that takes any money from the federal government or the state government has to allow for medical exemptions, religious exemptions, and exemptions of conscience. Because that's a constitutionally protected right in New Hampshire. So I believe that that's kind of where we're headed. And I know some people are already like, oh, look, the mandates are going away, blah, blah, blah. And so they kind of don't think it's that big of a deal. I see this as being a big deal going forward. We have just laid the groundwork. They know exactly how to manipulate people into a lot of things now. So I think that these are definitely still the biggest priority of the year. Yeah.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi,
my name
nice
is
to see
Mark Koldorf. In 2020, it was very clear to me that the only way to change this thing that was going on was pressure from the public.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what has happened.
Yes.
So I want to thank you and your organization, Open New Hampshire, for the enormous, fantastic work you've done in New Hampshire for doing that.
Thank you.
It's been like a spearhead in this movement in this country. I also want to thank you for the work that you will continue to do with Rebuild New Hampshire, which I think is equally important. We have to make sure that this can never be repeated, that 90+% of the population realize what a disaster and mistake it was. And I also think that while we have to keep those responsible,
Mm-hmm.
We also have to welcome in people
who are just starting to wake up.
Yes.
Yes.
It wasn't their fault.
Right.
They were scared by CNN or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's natural to be fear if you these
Sure.
things. And I have friends, many friends among that group.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to find a way to welcome them in so they become part of us and that they realize that what a mistake this was.
Yeah.
So one question I have for you is how can we help them, welcome them, and how can we bring them in to our fold?
Well, I want to thank you because I don't know if everyone's aware, but Dr. Koldorf is one of the Great Barrington doctors. And the Great Barrington Declaration probably did more to get the ball moving in the other direction than anything else. I actually saw it the day it was published, and I almost cried. So thank you so much. And Dr. Koldorf has been a great resource for me and for New Hampshire, and he's come and spoken to legislators. And so it's funny, I talked a couple of months ago, like right after the holidays, I talked to Dr. Mark McDonald. He wrote a book called The United States of Fear, How the United States fell victim to mass psychosis. He was the first person to coin the idea of mass psychosis that a lot of you might know that Dr. Malone brought up on Joe Rogan. And I called him and I said, you know, I mean, he sort of talks about people almost being addicts. They're addicted to this, right? And the fear is addicting. And I said to him, I said, how do you wake people up from that? And he was actually very hopeful. And this was, again, right after the holidays. And he said, listen, everyone got Omicron over Christmas. And so, they all realize, oh, wow, this thing that I have destroyed my life to avoid getting, I got anyway. And I'm still here. So he thinks that is the biggest off-ramp. I will say I do think that, Omicron was a gift from God. And I don't know where, how that all happened. But it is the thing that gave us the off-ramp. It gave people permission to get their lives back. And I do think that people, once they got a taste again of living a normal life, it's humanity. Humanity needs other people. Humans need other people. And I don't think they're going to want to go back now that they've realized what it meant to be human again. So we just have to keep encouraging that behavior. I wish I had some type of magical answer, but it's something I think about all the time. But I honestly think that Omicron was like the best thing that could have ever happened to us.
You mentioned before about the PrEP Act and the Child Vaccine Injury Act. Mm-hmm. And we know that if this vaccine becomes part of the CDC schedule for children, mm-hmm. it will be exempt from any type of liability in perpetuity. Right. Is there any power that you have as a state to reject the CDC schedule? It's only a guideline. Are you obliged to embrace that? And do the federal funds govern your decision-making in that process?
So to be clear, New Hampshire only has one sort of vaccine law, and that is our schedule to attend school and daycare, okay? And we actually don't embrace the entire ACIP schedule. We've been very conservative about the vaccines that are on that schedule, and you do have exemptions and all of that sort of thing. However, as far as liability, that's all governed at the federal. Am I right, Leah? Yeah, that's all. Leah knows. She's on HHS. She knows more than I do. So, yeah, no, that's the liability comes from federal law. It has nothing to really do with which vaccines in our schools we, require or don't require. I think the 1986 Act was like one of the biggest step towards medical tyranny that we had. I'm all for everyone getting whatever medical procedure they want to get, but there should always be responsibility. You don't have capitalism if you don't have responsibility for your actions and your choices. So
before my question, to just provide a little bit of pushback, maybe, I'm one of the property right sort of libertarians, mm-hmm. And I sort of think that it's life, liberty, and property, not life, liberty, or property. And mm-hmm. if we can create something that sort of self-reinforces all three of those, I think that would be optimal. But my question is, sorry, I just wanted to say that first. The question is, for the future, when we submit and help the legislators draft future legislation, is there something that maybe we can do? Because I really love the work that Rebuild NH is doing. Is there maybe something that we can do to sort of have a meeting of the minds of like the ones that are really passionate about the life/health freedom part, and the ones that are really passionate about the property rights part, so that we make something that everyone can sort of get behind and like fully endorse and push forward?
Again, this is what we've been working on since the summer. Okay, so my pushback to you is: do you really think? We just spelled out the cronyism. Do you really? In a perfect libertarian utopia, mandates wouldn't exist. This is a government-created problem. And in my opinion, if you don't start fighting fire with fire, we're never getting out of this. We were getting into a ball of crony capitalism that just is continuing to roll and roll and roll. And if we don't put something in front of it, I'm just not... I understand it's not the perfect solution. How do you personally feel? I'm going to ask you. How do you personally feel about that bill I spelled out with the exemptions and it applying to businesses that take state or federal funding?
So with the issue of cronyism, and this is just my personal opinion. The issue of cronyism, you shouldn't really be targeting the businesses. What we should be targeting is the politicians that pushed these lies in the first place. And so I think that you would find a lot of people that instead of pushing the restrictions on businesses, that we instead maybe like hold war trials or something equivalent for like these politicians.
Sure, I'm I'm up for that.
And prison sentence.
Yeah. Listen, that sounds fun to me. In my opinion, just general corporate America right now, okay, we had the opposite of the free market, right, where we just shut down businesses, right? I mean, we can all sit here and agree that that was egregious. But it made corporate America so petrified of government that they are willing to bend the knee to the ever-changing, arbitrary, and unscientific whims of any three-letter agency. And I don't know how you change that if you don't put a roadblock in the way and say, you don't have to do this, right? We're cutting off the federal government. We do have a bill to make ourselves a sanctuary state, modeled after the Vermont's sanctuary state law. And in regards to federal mandates, right? We will not enforce, period. And we can definitely do those types of things, but it's a cultural issue now, right? And I'm unclear about how you change that cultural issue. I mean, well, who said that?
You know, having been a part of the liberty movement for my entire adult life, I have to ask, what do we learn from this and how do we move on? Because if the liberty movement had any impact on this country, none of this would have happened in the first place. But somehow it happened, and we have a movement that's existed for 50 years and has really had no impact on this country.
To be honest, I remember like March 2020 when we were first starting to talk about lockdowns and going on libertarian forums, and the amount of libertarians advocating for lockdowns was shocking. Yep, just like that. And it was truly shocking. Fear does crazy things to people's minds. And, well, that's what, this Dr. Mark McDonald, that is his theory, is that they are like addicts and their brains are just like that messed up from the fear. And I think too many libertarians sat back, number one. Even if they didn't agree with it, they sat back and they didn't fight back hard enough, early enough. They were too afraid of public opinion, okay? And number two, too many just agreed with it, that there are, like I said before, that there are contingencies on their freedom.
Well, I don't know what your definition of a libertarian is, because I don't really know any libertarians who are in favor of this. And of course, the Cato Institute did not disappoint me because my expectations were already so low to begin with. So again,
I know
that is a good question, too, though. But
the groups,
I'm also, but as you pointed out, and I was saying this several years ago. It's not like we're teaching, somebody to drive a stick shift who's never driven a stick shift. We are trying to rehabilitate drug addicts here.
Yeah.
And, but that is something we can at least try to hack or unlock, because they can be manipulated.
Right.
We know they can be manipulated. We know they want to be manipulated. They want to be gaslighted. They want to be lied to. So how do we use that to our advantage? And instead, we've tried to talk to them like they're intelligent people.
Well, I think that there are a couple of, I hate to say there's anything that good that came out of this, okay? But one of them is that way less kids go to public school now, okay? And I think it's really hard for people. So I was homeschooled, and so I think that's part of why I held out against some of this. I was never conditioned as like an early child. But, some people are kind of programmed. And so even if they eventually learn other ideals and get some different thoughts, I don't know, a lot of people defaulted to their programming. So one good thing that came out of this is that we have alternative means. A lot more people are not going to be programmed. So hopefully we can keep that going.
I'm actually going to ask a question on this one. So one of the things that has been utilized in many aspects by government is taking something and then giving it back to you with strings. So, for example, using eminent domain to take roads and then saying you can't use them unless we give you this license.
Right.
Or you must get a business license to operate, and then we saw what happened with COVID.
Yeah.
I appreciate the many attempts that the state representative put forward to try to protect from vaccine mandates.
Mm-hmm.
And I also acknowledge that the federal government is kind of on a runaway train. I know there's talk of secession, that's great. But what I would like to see is something that is on a more fundamental level. When the government, especially the federal government, but also the state government, take steps that infringe upon rights, that we have a basic protection that covers anything like that, whether it's Second Amendment, First Amendment, body autonomy, all of those things are things I think that the state can protect us from without being specific to things like vaccine or medical procedures. Is that something that resonates with you and with other people in the legislature?
Sure, but there's a political reality as well that it kind of has to almost be done on an issue-by-issue basis, right? I mean, this is why, we have, we're trying to do that with 2A rights, right? So, there'll be a bill for that. There's a bill for the vaccine side. I'm not sure. I mean, listen, I'm up for suggestions. But a general protection like that, people have to really argue. And I can tell you there's a really big argument in the House. We had a bill that passed by only 2 votes a couple of weeks ago, and that was about the CMS mandate. It was pretty basic. All it really said was that state-run medical facilities, the people in them have to have exemptions, right, from vaccines. And the amount of pushback, I mean, the people being like, the lobbyists went, of course, well, we know that's a problem, but the lobbyists went bananas being like, oh my God, we're going to lose CMS funding if we do this. Oh my God, the sky is falling. And I'm sitting there being like, do you really think they're going to cut off grandma? Really? You think you're going to cut off grandma because we gave the nurse a religious exemption? Come on, give me a break. But just doing that, 2 votes, folks. So, I mean, I'm hoping we get a better majority of Liberty Republicans next year. And, we can make bigger inroads like that. I would love to see that. Yeah, absolutely.
So my question is actually kind of a follow-up on that. I know it's probably pretty difficult to do something really broad that encompasses everything. But, it's really discerning that it's kind of a problem that we ended up in this space because of COVID and with all this that happened. I mean, you asked anyone, I mean, even the most paranoid probably didn't see exactly what happened with COVID coming before it happened. So my question really is more, what kind of lessons can we learn from this? Not just what happened, reacting to what happened, but how can states or individuals or anyone really, kind of stem the tide against future kind of authoritarian, I guess, I don't know, plans like that. I don't know what to call it really, but it doesn't have to be a virus or anything, but they're going to use whatever they can to their advantage. So
never let a good crisis go to waste.
Has there been kind of any reflection amongst, I guess, legislators and also other people that you've spoken to kind of figure out how to prevent this in the future? Right.
So state of emergency reform, it was such a huge priority for us for that exact reason. I mean, personally, I don't think we need state of emergency laws at all. And in fact, New Hampshire had never used theirs. It was a reaction to 9/11, another bad reaction to 9/11. And we enacted state of emergency laws that we had never had before. So, but repealing the entire thing is probably not a political reality, but that's why doing as much as you can to create checks and balances during a state of emergency so that there can never be runaway mayhem like there was with this is one huge part of that puzzle. Hey, we get a nice majority next year. I'd love to see some constitutional amendments, right? Everybody has the right to work, right? No one can take away your livelihood. No one can take away your business, where the government can't take away your livelihood, can't take away I would love to see something like that because, and I understand that that's a reaction to a specific thing that happened, but that's so overarching. That could happen in any emergency now that we've set that precedent, right? So that would be, I would love to see a constitutional amendment and state of emergency reform. Listen, we kind of held the budget hostage to make that happen. That was a big deal.
No, I think there's been a lot of, I've been following it a bit, and I think there's been a lot of, really good responses to this.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure that, going forward, like you said, no crisis will go to waste for the authoritarians. So
do you think that this woke people up more, though? The average person. I was asleep at the wheel. I'm not going to lie.
I think certain aspects of it woke people up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think people awoke to certain realities, but I don't think that it necessarily, converted people into our line of thinking, So, yes, some people, sure.
Some people.
Especially in New Hampshire, I think that's a bit more of a reality. But if you go, just south down into Massachusetts or, New York, there's still a lot of people that really want the government doing and managing their lives. Despite all this, they don't see the contradiction there.
I think that 30% have always been on our side. I think that 30% are lost forever. And I think it's about, dealing with changing the hearts and the minds of the 40% in the middle. Yeah. And to let them know that this, number one, didn't have to happen. And that, yes, you never give up your rights for any kind of perceived sense of security ever. It will never work out. The government is very bad. Yeah, I think you heard that one before. Yeah. And frankly, I just don't know how you can look around and not realize how terrible the government is at managing anything. This has been one unmitigated disaster after another for 2 years.
Hey, thank you, Melissa, for your endorsement and donation to my campaign for U.S. Congress. I want to say it publicly. Yeah. And so on my campaign trail, I talk about all those COVID shutdown, all the past few years, and ever since Obama, actually, the central government in not just in the United States, but in the world, actually, there seems like some kind of got me very worried, the movement to take after, communist China, also tyranny model to control, track their citizens. So they, I don't know now what is the current status of this vaccine passport in the whole country. But I have been compared that with the potential that China's social credit system to track human beings 24/7.
Yes.
And all of the Western country world is like, what is going on? Why all the after CCP style? So I want to know, if I do win, hope you'll help me to win on the U.S. Congress floor, what is the federal government and the Congress could do according to you, and special eyes for our state, and to stop any potential to go down that path of China-style social credit system. It could be digital currency, it could be vaccine passport, it could be another pandemic coming that you have unlimited power for emergencies and public health bureaucrats. There's so much stuff that we need to think about now. We cannot wait until next one happening, and that would be too late.
I don't think that the vaccine was the end goal. I think that, a social credit score system is the end goal of all of this, and this was just their trial. Federal government. Well, can you write a bill that just outlaws data collection? I don't know. But you could start with the vaccines. A good starting place would be that the federal government. Right now they have a database based on every employee in the country that has filed a religious exemption. So getting rid of those would be a great start. Getting rid of what's the Smart Health Pass? Is that what it's called? Yeah, the Smart Health Pass is what's being rolled out in several states. We are working on that by the way, we're amending a bill tomorrow, but to really clarify that the state of New Hampshire and its political subdivisions cannot require any private business to require vaccines for their customers and their employees. We have to be really careful. We don't want to be Boston. We don't want to be New York City. If you start cutting off some of those channels, I think it helps. But yeah, the databases are going to be the really big thing. It can never require. I don't know how does it. Well, you would know better than I would. So in
started
China,
on the Obama, the Common Core start to track and collect the data for children,
you're right.
And now expanded into health,
right.
into financial transactions. So if you're not PC now,
Yep.
you couldn't lose your bank account,
right?
It's just like China, right?
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly.
Or Canada.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No. You got to start cutting off the data collection. No data collection. And we're trying at the state level to say we will not share any data with the federal government. Period. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of the sanctuary state law, because we do have an IAS system in New Hampshire. We're the last state in the country to enact one, but it exists now. So we are data collecting on every vaccination, but we've been working. A big priority this year has been to make that system opt-in. So you have to give your explicit permission to be added to this database. You can't be added without your knowledge in any way. So we've been really working on that, and then that we are going to cut that information can never be shared with the federal government. I would like to point out that during the state of emergency, Emergency Order 76, I went out screaming about, because I considered that to be the biggest constitutional infringement that the government made. And what that did was it required everyone who got the COVID vaccine to be included in the IIS system. And it's supposed to be a voluntary system, because our state constitution requires that it says that your privacy cannot be infringed by government, right? So, but he made it mandatory. So we also have a bill to inform everyone who was put into that system that they can be removed from the system now. So,
well, thank you. We'll discuss more in detail.
Absolutely,
Need your help.
Ellie.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Since it's already down. So I'm kind of disappointed when I hear you say we have to go fight one topic at a time for civil
politics.
rights. Yeah, but it's not okay, right? If you have to fight for a violation of your civil rights, it means you didn't have them when you needed them. And so I think we need to be more creative and consider ways that New Hampshire could be a free state, as in ways to fast track civil complaints for civil rights violations, whether they're and lower the bar.
I know,
for
you realize that the
them.
government didn't think that they violated your civil rights at all, like during the last 2 years.
But
you realize that, right?
It's not new. It's been going on for years, and people have let it, or been too afraid to speak up. It's happened in education. It's happened in many other sectors. So the thing is, it's a death, by 1,000 cuts. You can't win by going one topic at a time. So I would hope you think about some sort of civil rights panel or commission where people have complaints, they can get fast-tracked, and things could be fixed before, so they don't have to each go to the Supreme Court individually. It takes years and deep pockets, and it's a toll. And if we were a really free state, we'd find a way to keep people free.
Well, and as Andrew Munus would say, if you have to sue for your rights, you didn't really have rights. So, this isn't a new issue, right? This is. Fighting for liberty is a continuous fight, and often we only get there through the terrible word of incrementalism, right? I think we have to think first of all of the ground that we lost over the last 2 years. We lost a ton of ground. We have to start there and to get back to where we started. Now, like I said before, I do think that we actually have the chance to be freer than we started, because we just didn't know that this could happen. We didn't know we had to fight for that. But no, I don't see. I mean, some type of system, I suppose, could be good, except that sometimes those get really bogged down politically. But that's a thought. That's definitely a thought. Yeah. I'm always open to suggestions. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you get on our email list if you're not already on there, because we can keep you guys updated. And, thank you for all the work that you guys do to fight for liberty as well. What? Oh, JR. Okay. So on our homepage here, our treasurer and one of our founders, JR Hole, is currently in a court case. His son, he gave his son ivermectin when he had COVID, and he was reported for that, and he is facing potentially losing custody of his son. So we are, crowdsourcing for his legal fees. So, and keep him in your thoughts and prayers also. So.